Before the birth of the United States, before rebellion against King George, there was another war. A war born of broken promises, stolen lands, and shattered alliances. A war so brutal it tore neighbors apart, leaving entire villages in flames. This is the story of Metacomet, known to the English as King Philip, and the savage conflict he led to defend his people's survival. Hello, and welcome to Deadliest Disasters. In the early 17th century, the Wampanoag Confederacy thrived across what we now call southern New England. Their leader, Massasoit, forged a fragile peace with the Pilgrims at Plymouth, an alliance born of mutual need. But by the time Massasoit's son, Metacomet, ascended to power in 1662, that peace had begun to crumble. Metacomet was no stranger to diplomacy. He adopted the English name Philip in an effort to communicate within their terms, yet every treaty seemed to tilt in favor of the colonists. Land deeded in one breath was seized in the next. Colonial courts claimed jurisdiction over tribal members. Trade goods were rigged to cheat native hunters. And with each broken promise, Metacomet's resolve hardened. Tensions reached a breaking point in the winter of 1674 and 75. John Sassamon, a Christianized native who served as Philip's interpreter, warned Plymouth magistrates of an impending uprising. Shortly after, Sassamon was found murdered beneath the ice of Assawampset Pond. 3 Wampanoag Indians were swiftly tried, convicted, and hung. To Metacomet's people, this was no justice, it was a declaration of war. On June 20th, 1675, the first shots rang out in Swansea. It wasn't a planned siege, but a spontaneous raid. Metacomet's answer to colonial aggression. And with that, King Philip's War erupted. The war spread like wildfire through New England. In the first 6 months alone, over half of all English towns north and east of Providence were under attack. Springfield, Marlborough, Providence, Taunton, none were safe. No one was spared. Men were scalped, women and children were dragged from their beds, forced to march into the wilderness. Farms were torched, and livestock slaughtered. In many cases, the colonists' retaliation was indiscriminate. Entire villages razed, including friendly Indians who had stayed loyal to the crown. Metacomet rallied his allies under the banner of defending their homes, their culture, and their very existence. His guerrilla warriors struck swiftly, vanishing before the English could mount a full response. Yet for every Indian raid, there was a harsher reprisal. In December of 1675, colonial forces led by Josiah Winslow descended on a Narragansett fortified village in the Great Swamp of Rhode Island. What followed was a massacre. Estimates vary, but between 400 and 600 Narragansetts, combatants and non-combatants alike, perished. The burning of wigwams, the stabbing of fleeing women and children. It was a slaughter of tragic proportions. And yet, despite this devastating blow, Metacomet endured. But as winter set in, hunger and cold ravaged native encampments. Desertion sliced through Metacomet's ranks. Some tribes, desperate to survive, sued for peace. The colony's militias, bolstered by survivors of Great Swamp, pressed on relentless pursuit. On August 12, 1676, in a clearing near Mount Hope, Metacomet was spotted. A musket shot rang out, and the Wampanoag leader fell, mortally wounded. The colonist dragged his body back to Plymouth, drew and quartered him, then displayed his head on a spike for over 2 decades. His wife and son, captured earlier, were sold into slavery in the Caribbean. His land and his people all but erased. King Philip's War ended not with a treaty, but with annihilation. Over 5,000 natives perished. Thousands were sold into slavery or forced to flee westward. And nearly 1,000 colonists died. The economic toll, village after village in ashes, left New England shaken to its core. King Philip's War was the greatest calamity in 17th century New England and is considered by many to be the deadliest war in colonial American history. In a space of little more than a year, 12 of the region's towns were destroyed and many more were damaged. The economy of the Plymouth and Rhode Island colonies was ruined and their population was decimated, losing 1/10 of all men available for military service. More than half of New England's towns were involved in the conflict. Thousands of Wampanoags and their allies were publicly executed, enslaved, or forced to flee, and the Wampanoags were left effectively landless. Most historians agree King Philip's War resulted in the highest loss of life per capita of any war in colonial or U.S. history. Philip's forces attacked at least 52 of 90 colonial settlements, destroying a dozen and burning over 1,200 homes. The precise numbers of lives lost is hard to pinpoint. Some historians claim the death toll was perhaps 30% of the English population of New England and estimate that the combined effects of war, disease, and starvation killed half of the native population in the region. Per capita, King Philip's War would have been deadlier than the Civil War and Revolutionary War combined. Yet in that crucible, something new emerged. The colonists, abandoned by crown authorities who sent no reinforcements, learned to rely on one another. Militias became more organized and towns formed tighter confederacies. A distinct, self-sufficient identity began to take root, one that would later fuel cries for independence. Today, the echoes of King Philip's War resonate in our collective memory, though most Americans have never heard its name. It stands as one of the bloodiest conflicts per capita in American history, yet it's often overshadowed by wars to come. For the Wampanoag people, it was an apocalypse, a world upended, families broken, and cultures threatened. For the colonists, it was a brutal lesson in survival, a trial by fire that forged and hardened frontier spirit. Both legacies live on in the resilience of native nations still fighting for recognition and in the American ideals of self-reliance born from isolation. I'll wrap up with Wampanoag elder Frank James' words, quote, "We the Wampanoag welcomed you, the white man, with open arms, little knowing that it was the beginning of the end, that before 50 years were to pass, the Wampanoag would no longer be a free people," unquote. Thank you all for tuning in. Please like and subscribe and let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover. This has been Deadliest Disasters.